I think most of the time, maybe not 100%, but most of the time, if we look at what we're confused about, what we're anxious about, it all has to do with the 8 worldly concerns, or with something that the self-centered mind is really fixated on, or fixated on in an unhealthy way. I mean, if we're worried and anxious about the state of the world, it could seem like we're really caring about all living beings, but the way the mind is caring about all of them is in an unhealthy manner, because anxiety and confusion and despair don't bring any good results at all. But so much of our confusion is like, well, shall I do this? Shall I do that? What about going here? What about doing that? I'm so afraid this will happen. I'm so afraid that will happen. What should I do next? Maybe this, maybe that. Do you have that kind of mind? I know when I have that kind of mind, when I look what I'm so full of self-doubt about or anxiety about, it usually has something to do with how can I eke out the most pleasure of this life. Yeah, it's like I want to have pleasure in this life, whether it's sensual pleasure or, praise, reputation, being seen as a success in my own eyes or other people's eyes. All of that kind of stuff is the fuel for anxiety and confusion, at least in me. I don't know about you. Yeah? And thus wasting a considerable amount of time trying to figure out how to get the most happiness I possibly can from this upcoming decision that I'm going to make. Yeah? And then wasting incredible time not doing anything because I'm in such a state of doubt about how to get the most pleasure. Yeah. Whereas if we are able to let go a bit of this grasping and attachment to the happiness of this life, and instead just think, okay, in the long term, what is going to benefit me and others most? Yeah, in the long term. Yeah, doesn't matter if I go here, it doesn't matter if I go there, doesn't matter if I do this career or that career. Sometimes it might matter because a certain career may inspire you to create more virtue or more negativity. So in that respect, you want to care about what you spend your time on. But from the aspect of how can I get the best reputation and prove to my family I'm great, or prove to my friends, whatever it is, whatever our trip is, from that aspect, it's not important at all. Okay? And so, when we have a clear motivation, we don't get so tangled up in these things. And instead, if there's a choice to make, well, in which alternative can I abstain, can I keep my precepts the best? Can I live an ethical life the best? In which alternative will I have the time and the energy and the willingness to do my Dharma practice? Because we often rationalize choices of, if I do this, then I'll have more time for my practice, but we know we won't spend that extra time doing our practice. Or, I'll work this job, then I'll get more money so I can be more generous to the Sangha. I can't tell you how many people have told me that. And how little we've seen from it. That doesn't really work as a motivation in the long term, I think. So, to really think, what's going to benefit people? And not just benefit them now, but benefit them long term. I mean, we should try and benefit people as much as we can now. But really looking at the long term is very, very important. Yeah, many lifetimes. Many lifetimes. Because if I do something in this lifetime, I might have a lot of success, I might have a good reputation, but because of what I'm doing or because of what I'm not doing, I wind up with a lower rebirth next rebirth. Yeah, if I'm born in the lower realms, how am I going to benefit anybody, let alone myself? Yeah. So, we want to get a good rebirth so we can continue practicing the path, so we can continue increasing our ability to be of greater and greater benefit to other living beings. Yeah. So we may get, have a great life this time, but when we die, that's all gone, finish, kaput, it's nowhere. All we take with us is the karma and that, the mental habits. And so, will that be enough so that we can, and do we have enough control of our mind so that we can have a good rebirth next lifetime? And like I said, if we don't have a good rebirth, we're going to be in a suffering state and forget being of benefit to anybody else. Yeah. So we may live a life this lifetime in which we're trying to please everybody else and trying to be what we think they think we should be. And they may be happy with it, but never completely. And so we may live that kind of life, but what's going to happen next life? And will we be able to benefit those people, let alone benefit other people, in our next life? So I think, this perspective of many lifetimes, this perspective of how to work with karma, how to make choices, how to regulate our lives and our actions to reap the most benefit for self and others in the long term. This is a whole world view that we have to get used to. Yeah, and it's different than our current worldview, which is, how can I be okay right now? So it's very good why we have the chance to really stretch our mind and start thinking long term like this. Yeah, because this life goes very quickly. It's there and then it is gone. And at the time we're dying, and we don't know what age we're going to die. We always think, later, but we don't know. So it's better to really use our time and energy in a good way now. Okay, not push ourselves, but if we cultivate this worldview, then automatically the way we live changes. If we don't cultivate the worldview and we're just trying to squeeze ourselves into a mold of what we think a good Dharma practitioner would look like, that doesn't work and we become very unhappy because we don't have the worldview. So we have to really develop that worldview and then, start seeing things through that worldview, and automatically then how we live changes, and we don't have to push ourselves. Okay, is this making some sense? Yeah.
So how does one establish certainty that transmigration is the case? What proof is there?
What proof is there? Okay, first you have to ask yourself, for me, what would constitute proof? Yeah. So what would it take to prove it to you?
Well, beyond the shadow of a doubt, like be as certain as gravity. I jump up in the air, and come back down.
Mm-hmm. So how are you going to know that about rebirth? What would constitute proof?
That's what I'm asking. I don't know how to begin to examine that.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking kind of the question a little bit different. Like, what would constitute proof? Because there are many proofs, but then people always say, well, that's good enough, that's not good enough, that's not good enough. So then, that's why I want, well, what do you want? Do you want somebody to die and then come back in their present body and say, I died and I reborn, and then I also came back here in my present body? Is that what I want for proof? Well, that sounds good. Is that possible? No. Because if somebody dies and is reborn, they're not going to come back in their present body and tell us about it, because they're already in their next body.
Why it's kind of problematic.
Okay, so that's why we have to really ask ourselves, well, what do I mean by proof? Okay, so if you're thinking for other people to remember their previous lives, well, yes, there are people who remember their previous lives. Yeah, and there are indications from certain people, that really show that they can remember their previous lives. His Holiness, aside from the fact that, His Holiness himself, when they found him, they were, the search party was dressed as like a merchant party, and the lamas were dressed up as the caretakers of the animals, because then they would go sit in the kitchens, which is where the kids were, and this little boy jumped on one of the men's lap and tugged at his prayer beads and said, "Those are mine," and they were the prayer beads of the previous Dalai Lama. And when they went to leave, he cried. He wanted to go with them, and follow them. And when it was with the prayer beads, when he did that, then the Lama, then somebody said, well, if you can tell us who this person is, we'll give them to you. And he said, yeah, you're Lama so-and-so. Yeah, he recognized them. So, even in His Holiness's case, very clear signs of memory and familiarity with a previous life. And there's also some story about dentures. Does anybody remember what that was? Something that
He knew his predecessor had hit them in some kind of and then when he went to the monastery, he went to look for them and he found
them. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and identified them. Yeah, but then His Holiness often tells the story of there was one little Indian girl who was about 4 years old, and she kept on saying, I'm the daughter of so and so, or I belong here in this village, and the parents actually eventually took her to that village, and there was a family who had, a relative, a child had died, or, a grown person, somebody had died with that name. Yeah, and this child who was born in a neighboring village remembered the whole scene, and and they verified that when they went to that village. And then also, I wish I could find this video. Maybe somebody who's good at finding things online can find it. It was a video about cases of rebirth, and there was one woman, I believe it was, who remembered being a Dr. James Burns in Scotland somewhere. Yeah? Did you see that video by any chance?
No, but I read about it.
Yeah. And so there were these people doing research about it. She was from Australia or somewhere else, had never been to UK. And so the researchers took her there, blindfolded her, led her to the medical school, or was it, no, I can't remember, maybe she got off the boat, she led them to the medical school. I can't remember exactly, but she like knew the way. And then when she got there, she was walking around the medical school and she recognized different things. And at a certain point, she said, but no, it wasn't like this. The hallway wasn't here. The hallway went this way. And they went into the stacks in the library and found out that, yes, those centuries ago when Dr. James Burns was there, in fact, that was the layout of the medical school. Yeah, so she remembered it all these lifetimes later. Yeah. So you have to see what constitutes proof for you. Yeah. Does it mean I have to remember something? Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes just understanding our own life. Did you ever wonder, I mean, why were you born you? And why were you born in the family you were born in? Why weren't you born as somebody else? And why did you have certain kind of personality tendencies from the time you were very, very little? Yeah? Any parent will tell you that kids are not born a clean slate. They have personalities when they're born. They have predispositions and tendencies. Yeah? You have kids, is that true? Yeah?
And it just makes me think of the many days I could do it. And so often, before I understood it, you look at this child and he's looking at you as it's being born, and I so often thought, you've been here before, you're an old soul, and you just know there's a connection there somehow. It's not with every baby, they don't always come out history, but you know, there is a really very strong feeling.
Yeah. 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 And then if you examine it logically, yeah, as soon as you accept the thing that there's the body and there's the mind, that the mind is formless, then you have to ask, where did the mind come from? It's an impermanent thing, which means it's created by causes and conditions. What were the causes and conditions for the mind? Yeah? Did the stork bring it? Yeah. Did you get part of your parents' mind? In other words, their parents really did lose their mind when they had you? Yeah? Yeah. Do you think you have your parents' mind?
No.
Do you feel like you have your parents' mind? No. No. I mean, our habits, our tendencies, our likes and dislikes, so different from our parents. Okay, so then where did our mind come from? Yeah? Magic? Magic just means I don't know. But, everything has to have causes. So, if one moment of mind, your mind today depended on the mind of yesterday, depended on the mind of the day before, there's this continuity of clarity and awareness, the nature of the mind. Then you get to the time of conception in the womb, and where did that mind come from? Until that, every moment of mind got traced back to a previous moment of mind. So where did that first moment of mind come from? God created it. God created it? God is permanent. How can something that's permanent create? Because permanent things don't change, and creation involves change. And then if God created your mind, then why in the world did he do it?
I have to complain.
Yeah, complain to God. Yeah. And then they tell you, well, so because God felt lonely. But God's supposed to be perfect. How can he feel lonely? Then why did God create suffering? So we can learn from it. Well, why didn't God create us smart enough to start with? Because we don't seem to be learning from suffering. Yeah. So where does that first moment of mind come from? If every moment of mind until that point came from the preceding moment of mind, it had to have come from the moment of mind before that time of conception. Yeah? There's nowhere else it could have come from. So then you establish a continuity of mind before this life. Hmm? Mm-hmm.
Yes. Going a little bit off, but I just want to ask from a friend about where does karma store? You know, how does karma come to about? And then he was asking about something like Akanishta, or another school is explaining it that there's an Akanishta field or Akanishta.
Your life is known as the storehouse consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there's different philosophical positions about that. You know, some schools say the mind carries the carries the karma. Some, the Chittamadrans, say there's the storehouse consciousness that carries it. The Prasangikas say it's the mere I. In other words, the person that exists by being merely labeled. That's what carries the karma from life to life. Okay? So there is some kind of continuity. Saying there's a storehouse consciousness, yeah, it gets kind of close to saying there's a soul, you know, which the Buddha is not going to go anywhere near that. But for certain people, he taught that because that was a skillful way to get them, you know, on the path and at least going in the right direction. Yeah. So I think this is something that's really important to think about. You know, is there a future life? And His Holiness also says, well, even if you're not sure, if you live this life as if there's a future life, then if there winds up to be one, you won't have missed, you'll be in good shape. If you live in this life as if there is not a future life, if there winds up to be one, you're going to be have trouble. Yeah. So he says, you know, living as if there's a future life will definitely benefit you, you know, even this lifetime. Hmm? Okay.
But there's also no proof that there's not.
Yes. Yeah, he points that out too. There's no proof that there's no future lifetime, you know? Just because I don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So you know, has anybody been able to prove that there is no future life? Yeah.
Well, haven't there been people who've had near-death experiences where there is a void?
They usually see some kind of light and have some kind of feeling of continuity. But there is some feeling of emptiness. But then when you study the stages of death, you know, that corresponds very much with that. But also the whole near-death experience thing, they really see that it also corresponds with what culture you grow up in. Yeah? So... Shall we go back to our text? But it is something important to think about. Yeah, definitely something important to think about. Because if there is only this life, then in one way, just live it up and just don't get caught. Which is the way many people look at this life. You know, there's only this life, live it up, just don't get caught. Yeah? Then other people do have a sense of ethical restraint, you know, from their own side and say, okay, I could do that, but I don't want to because I do care about others, so I want to restrain my behavior. Yeah. So, you know, there are people like that. It doesn't mean that if you don't believe in rebirth, you act completely bizarre. Yeah. But, you know, having some conviction in rebirth gives you a very different perspective on life. Yeah. Very different. Okay, so we were on do not slander or envy others, always keep the precepts, be content with food and drink, always enjoy living in a hermitage, concentrate the mind, and take delight in vigorous effort. This is the Vinaya of Tathagata Visbahu, the unattached one, the fully awakened one. So yesterday we talked about do not slander or envy others. I was thinking, after our discussion, that slandering and envy, as somebody pointed out, they are a chief cause for discord and disharmony. And what do we have? Was it here later on? Or is it in the dedication, where it talks about the harmony of the Sangha is the chief cause for nirvana, isn't it? Something like that? I think it's a little bit later, not in our paper here. Yeah? But I was just thinking, kind of the advice to not slander or envy others, because that not only creates so much negative karma and disharmony, but especially in the Sangha, disharmony in the Sangha is very bad for the existence of the Dharma in the world. Yeah, because if the Sangha is fighting and quarreling, they're not practicing. People are losing faith. People see their example and lose faith in the Dharma. Okay, and then so much time is wasted with all of that. And then the next advice was always keep the precepts. Okay, so why always keep the precepts? Yeah, well, some of the precepts there's two divisions of precepts. Some regulate naturally negative actions, and some regulate actions that are not naturally negative. Naturally negative actions refers to actions like killing, stealing, lying, and so on, that any ordinary person, if they did those, would almost 100% have a negative motivation for doing them. Yeah? And so they're kind of naturally negative in the sense that ordinary beings who do them accumulate, destructive karma. Then there's other precepts that regulate actions that are not naturally negative, but actions that if you do them, it creates problems, or it brings you nearer to creating the naturally negative actions. Okay, so like the one we were talking about with rice and vegetables. Yeah, I mean, well, that might be naturally negative if you have the intention to deceive. That one's going to be naturally negative, but. Okay, there's one, what's a good, not to ride in vehicles. Okay? That's not naturally negative. Yeah. But, in ancient times, riding in vehicles was prohibited because it usually made you very arrogant. For two reasons. One is it made you very arrogant because only the royalty could ride in vehicles. Or two, who was pulling the vehicle? It was a human being, it was an animal, it was somebody else who was suffering. And so to avoid harming other living beings. Okay? So although that wouldn't be a naturally negative action, it could lead you into either arrogance, which could lead into naturally negative actions, or it could lead into apathy for the suffering of others. Okay, when we have the precepts, when there's a naturally negative action that is prohibited also by a precept, if you do that action, you create the negative karma that anybody would create who would do it, plus you create a transgression of the precept and you need to purify that transgression of the precept. If it's an action that is not naturally negative, that the Buddha prohibited, that you avoid because the Buddha prohibited it, then you don't create the negative karma of a naturally negative action, although if you did do the action with attachment or so on, there would be some negativity there. But you still have the karma of transgressing a precept established by the Buddha, and you have to purify that. So we purify the negative karma, the destructive karma, through practices like Vajrasattva and the 35 Buddhas, and in general the 4 opponent powers for purification. So that purifies the negative karma part of it. Then to purify the part that is a transgression of a precept, that the Buddha set down, then there's different things that you do in the Sangha community. So for the category of precepts that are just the 100 trainings that we have that have to do with etiquette, those you purify by confessing to yourself. Other precepts like the lapses that we have, for bhikshunis, 178 lapses, we purify those by confessing them to one other bhikshuni. Okay? If it's a lapse with forfeiture, where we've gotten robes or money or bowls or something, we've misused property in some way or gotten something that we shouldn't have, then you have to either have a Sangha karma which involves 4 or more monastics. If you're inside a boundary, a territory that the Sangha is designated, or if you go outside the boundary, then you need to do it with at least one other person, usually a few other people. Yeah. If you break a Sangha Vasesa, a remainder karma, then a remainder precept, then there has to be, the whole Sangha has to convene, and you have to confess in front of the Sangha and have a period of, penance where you go to the end of the line and you serve the Sangha and so on. And then a ceremony of rehabilitation. That's how, because those are much more serious offenses. If you commit a defeat, a parachika, then you're expelled from the Sangha, and you're done. Okay? So according to the level of precepts, and also what your attitude was when your mind state when you were doing the precepts, then there's different ways that you make amends with the Sangha community. Okay? So it's kind of a different process. And, by having to go in front of the whole community in a formal Sangha karma, a formal Sangha transaction, that's a little bit embarrassing. So that's a way that they use our tendency towards embarrassment in a good way to get us to refrain from negativity. Okay? So always keep the precepts, because if we keep the precepts, remember we went through at the beginning these 10 benefits of establishing the precepts, then those 10 benefits come about. Some of them are for ourselves personally in our practice, some are for the community, some are for society. Okay, so always keep the precepts. Be content with food and drink. Okay, that one, a little bit harder, isn't it? I always tell people when you, and I learned this from Christian monastics, when you come to the Abbey, there's 3 things you are not going to be content with. The schedule, the way the kitchen's run, and the pujas and liturgy and things like that. Okay? So if you know that you're not going to like all of those and that nobody here likes them, the way it's done, then you'll be happy. Okay? But it's true, isn't it? Those are the 3 areas that our minds get most disgruntled about. Huh? Why are we doing this? How come the meditation session's so long? How come we're chanting this? This person's out of tune. We're chanting too slow. We're chanting too fast. Why are they leading the meditation so quickly? I can't meditate. Why are they leading so slowly? I want to go on to the next step. Why don't we have the practice at this hour instead of that hour? I want more chanting. I want less chanting. Right? Okay, so that's one subject. Just get used to it. Yeah. Then the other thing is the schedule. I don't like the schedule. I don't want to get up at that time. I want to get up 15 minutes earlier. I want to get up 15 minutes later. I want more time for breakfast. I want less time for breakfast. I want more time for study. I don't have enough time to study. I have to offer service too much. I have enough time to study. I have a lot of offering service I want to do. I want more time to do that. You know, I think the lunch period's too short. We need more time to have a break after lunch because I want to take a nap. I don't like such a long break after lunch. I just ate and I'm full of energy. I want to get up, go and do something. Okay. I don't like the way the food's cooked. We don't have enough protein. We have too much protein. We don't have enough sugar and cookies. You know, we have too much sugar and cookies. You know, we don't have enough dishes. I want more vegetables. I don't like vegetables. I want more potatoes. Well, I don't like potatoes. I want more something or other. The food has too much salt. The food doesn't have enough salt. You know, you have too many dishes, not enough dishes. Why can't I drink orange juice? Why can't we have grape juice? You know? Yeah, I'm not drinking any soy milk, and that's expensive, so why can't we buy something that I like that's expensive? Because I'm not drinking what other people like that's expensive, you know? I'm not eating dinner, so I want this and that and the other thing. Well, I am eating dinner, and I want this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, people have no compassion for Venerable Yeshe, you know? Or Tracy, or Venerable Chuni when she's dealing with it, you know? Okay, so those are the three areas. Yeah, I mean, once in a while people complain, we don't have enough gloves. Once in a while I hear that. But cars. Yeah. We have too many cars. We have dirty cars. Why doesn't somebody clean the car? Well, nobody really cares if the car is cleaned. That's why we don't clean the car. Because nobody ever asks, why isn't the car clean? Have you ever heard anybody complain about that one? You know, only when we have a lama coming, oh, maybe we better clean the car, you know. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so be content with food and drink. Yeah, just, you know, train the mind. This is our training. We like the food, we don't like the food. Yeah, this is our training. Yeah, and usually there's something we can eat. And you may, you know, there may be a day where it's stuff that you know, you don't find so appetizing. Well, you know, unless it's going to make you throw up or make you sick, you eat it anyway. Or you have PB&J, you know. I don't like the peanut butter because it has too much whatever kind of saturated fat, but they never put out what I like to have with the bread, you know. So, you know, we'll always find something to complain about, won't we? Yeah. Anyway, they put out the PB&J, but it's not the kind of J I like, and the PB is with nuts, and I want smooth PB, and, you know. And why don't we get the kind of peanut butter that is powdered stuff that doesn't have so much so much saturated fat in it? And yeah, there's some kind of powdered peanut butter, you know, that you mix with water or something. Somebody was telling me about that. Yeah. So you know, I mean, our complaints never end, do they? Yeah. So it's just, this is what I have to work with. A complaining mind. Okay. Yeah. And then, really have some compassion for the person in the kitchen. Okay. Always enjoy living in a hermitage. Yeah. Well, I want the hermitage to be decorated this way. And I want the rooms to be this big. And I want a 1-story hermitage. Well, I want a 2-story hermitage. And I want an 8-foot ceiling. But a 10-foot ceiling is better because it makes the room look bigger. But then the heat goes to the top and you're cold in the winter. But that's good in the summer that the heat goes to the top. So let's have a 10-foot. Can't we compromise at 9 feet? No, I don't want a 9-foot ceiling. Yeah, I want carpeting. No, carpeting with off gases. Let's get pergo. So we made the whole upstairs floor pergo. Now they all complain that when people walk on it, it makes too much noise. So let's get carpeting. So then we're going to get carpeting in there, and then people will complain they don't feel well because it's off gases. Why didn't we make it, pergo again? That's much healthier. Yeah, well, pergo makes too much noise when you walk on it, and I'm in the chapel meditating, and I can hear somebody walking in the bedroom above. Oy vey. Okay, always enjoy living in a hermitage. Okay, so kind of, send your complaining mind to the Bahamas. Give it a vacation, send it away. Yeah, pretend that it didn't get allowed in the country when you came through immigration. Yeah. And, the hermitage can be a monastery. It can mean a solitary retreat place. But, rejoice that you have a place that's really good for your Dharma practice. Rejoice that you're not living, in a bad neighborhood, where you hear shotgun fire all the time. That's what's punctuating your meditation. Actually, one of my teachers, they went through a period of years where they didn't have a center, so he was living in a poor neighborhood, and Tenzin, who was the attendant, lived in the apartment next door. And she used to say, she heard gunshots all the time because it was a really bad neighborhood. Yeah. So, be glad to live in a hermitage. Yeah, even if there are bees and yellow jackets and so on. It's a perfect place to practice. It's much easier to practice here than practice other places. Yeah? So don't stay in the hermitage and then long for the city. There's all these good movies coming out, but I can't see them. I'm living here and there's no TV and we don't go to the movies. Yeah, I want to see all these movies, and everybody's talking about all these TV programs that are on this year, and I haven't been able to watch them. Yeah, how can I get down to the village? I can go to the theater, and then I can go to Starbucks. Yeah, I can get a cup of coffee. They don't allow coffee at this creepy place that's the Hermitage. They say coffee's bad. I want to go to Starbucks. Then I can go to the steakhouse. Then I can go to the movies. Yeah. Yeah, then I'll go over to my friend's house, and he's downloaded all this, music on his iPad or iPod or whatever it was, his iHead. Because that's all people have now is screens instead of heads, Yeah. So I'm going to go listen to all this music. Get me out of here. I'm with the same people every day in the Hermitage. I am so bored. This one's always complaining about this, and that one's always complaining about that. At least if I go see my family, I have a variety of complaints. And my family's so happy to see me. They're going to cook the food I love. And then I can sleep late when I go to visit my family. Nobody's going to be there ringing a bell at 5 o'clock in the morning. I can sleep until 8. And nobody's going to know it. And then I can go to the beach. I can put on my bikini. Go to the beach, get a suntan. You know, look at all those nice looking guys on the beach. Yeah. So enjoy living in the Hermitage. Yeah, really, because sometimes people, all they're doing is daydreaming about going down to town and doing everything that they can't do here. You know, I can go watch the football game. Yeah, in fact, I could go to the football game. I could go to the baseball game. I could go to the car races. Wow. Yeah, I could go play a round of golf. Maybe I'll bump into the president on the golf course. Okay. Always enjoy living in a hermitage. It is a privilege to live in a hermitage, isn't it? Yeah. Concentrate the mind and take delight in vigorous effort. Okay? So, when you don't create harmony by slander and envy, when you keep the precepts, okay, when you're content with food and drink, and when you enjoy living in the hermitage, by getting your mind to that state, you have developed a certain state, a certain level of mindfulness and introspective awareness, okay? Because you're developing mindfulness of your precepts, mindfulness of the way you want to act and the way you don't want to act. You're developing introspective awareness that's checking what's going on in my mind, what am I saying, how's my body moving, okay? So you're developing that ability to be more self-aware and to regulate what your body and speech are doing by doing all those other things. Then that prepares you to be able to concentrate. So when we talk about the 3 higher trainings, ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom, they come in that order because ethical conduct sets the stage for being able to develop concentration. Without keeping good ethical conduct, the mind is too rough, the mind is too disturbed, the mind has too much attachment and distraction in it to develop concentration. Okay? So by doing those first things, then, your mindfulness, your introspective awareness are more developed, so it's easier to concentrate the mind. When you concentrate the mind, then you can direct it to a virtuous object. You can use it to really analyze the way things exist. And once you have the correct view, then you can use that concentrated mind to stay focused on it without distraction and really integrate that the understanding of reality, the realization of the emptiness of inherent existence. You can integrate that in your mind. Okay? And then if you take delight in vigorous effort, then you can very easily gain realizations. But, to develop vigorous effort, to develop to have the vigorous effort to develop concentration and wisdom and bodhicitta, we need to also develop the first levels of effort that it takes to keep our precepts. Okay? So all of this is coming gradually in different stages, and it's set out in a very in a fashion that makes sense, why we practice things in different orders, and why this verse didn't start out with concentrate the mind and end with always enjoy living in the hermitage. Why didn't it start out? Why wasn't the verse phrased like that? Well, because you need to do these first things first before you have the ability to really concentrate the mind.
system of the monasteries,
Mhm.
how they set up that they learn the Vinaya land. I was wondering about that one when you follow actually these principles at the contemplation wisdom.
Mhm.
Why they set up Vinaya so much in the end where
I think that's, yeah.
essential.
Yeah, well, like I said before, their rationale is that you go in and you study all these other topics, and that helps you develop great faith in the Dharma, which makes you want to ordain. So they see the study of the other topics as something that, really gets you good and solid in the Dharma, and then you really see the advantage of becoming a monastic. So that's why you study the other topics first and the Vinaya second. But the reality of the way the monasteries are structured is the exact opposite. So hopefully, people have some teachings on the Vinaya when they first get ordained, at least knowing what the precepts are so that they don't break them, so that they don't create a root defeat. Yeah. But as for why they organize the monasteries the way they do, it's better to ask a Tibetan that. Because I have the same questions you do. Yeah? And I can't always answer, explain why other people do what they do. Yeah, because I don't always understand it myself. Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay, we'll just read the next verse, and then we'll do it tomorrow. Okay, just as a bee. Interesting. Just as a bee. Let's think of the little bees, that they have when you're a little kid. Remember the bees that look cute? They're cartoon bees. Yeah, remember how cute they look with their little thing, and they're busy bees, and they're smiling. Let's think of those bees. Just as a bee feeding on flowers only extracts their nectar without spoiling their color or fragrance, so a bhikshu or bhikshuni entering a city or village is always mindful only of his or her own behavior to see if it is correct, and does not interfere in others' affairs or inspect what they do or do not do. Okay, there is a lot of wisdom in this one. Okay. Yeah, just as a bee feeding on flowers, getting its own nourishment, only extracts their nectar, so only focuses on what's important, without spoiling their color or fragrance, so without damaging others or the environment around them. So a bhikshu or bhikshuni entering a city or village, in other words, for collecting alms, is mindful, so bears in mind, remembers only, their own behavior to see if it is correct, if it corresponds with their own internal values, if it corresponds with the trainings and precepts, and does not interfere in others' affairs, so is not a busybody, wanting to know what everybody else is doing, or inspect what they do or do not do. Who's doing this? Who's doing that? Why is this person doing that? Why aren't you doing that? You're supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to be doing that. How come you aren't doing it? Okay. Or did you hear the latest about so-and-so? I was in the village, or I visited my family, or I went, down to town and they told me this gossip and that gossip, and, So there's a lot in here to talk about, but we'll save that for Monday. Yeah?
In relation to yesterday, you talked about the returning Buddhas, the 1,000 that they were not returning Buddhas. What kind of Buddhas they are? What are Pratyeka Buddhas?
Oh, Pratyeka Buddhas are solitary realizers. They attain arhatship. Okay, so they're not the fully awakened Buddhas. Milarepa became a Buddha in this lifetime. There's many Buddhas who can be here, living here, but they don't all wear name tags and announce themselves.